The file in my hands was heavy. It contained the names of 12 dead women. They were all wealthy. They were all beautiful. And they were all patients of the most famous plastic surgeon in Beverly Hills. Dr. Julian Stone. I stood in the center of his private office on the top floor of the Aesthetica Clinic. The room smelled of expensive leather and sanitized steel. However, I was not admiring the decor. I was looking at a murder confession. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. It was exactly 11 in the evening. The cleaning crew had left an hour ago. I was supposed to be gone too. But I had stayed behind. I had spent 3 months playing the role of the perfect, empty-headed secretary. I brought Dr. Stone his oat milk lattes. I scheduled his Botox appointments. He thought I was harmless. He thought I was just Clara, the girl from Ohio who needed a job to pay her student loans. He was wrong. He did not know that my real name was Clara Vance. He did not know that I held a doctorate in toxicology from Stanford University. And he certainly did not know that patient number 4 in this red book was my mother. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I flipped the page. I saw the entry for Mrs. Evelyn Vance. The date was 5 years ago. The cause of death listed in the official police report was a sudden cardiac arrest. But in this book, the cause of death was written in elegant, gold cursive ink. It read, "Dosage error. Experiment 7. My blood ran cold." He had not just killed her by accident. He had used her. He had treated my mother like a lab rat to test his unauthorized beauty serums. I pulled my iPhone out of my pocket. I needed to take photos. I needed to send this to the FBI agent I had been secretly communicating with for 6 months. My hand shook as I opened the camera app. Click, click. I captured the pages. This was it. This was the end of the Dr. Stone empire. However, the universe had a cruel sense of humor. Ding. The sound of the private elevator echoed in the silent hallway. My stomach dropped. I froze. I looked at the digital display above the heavy oak doors. The arrow was moving up. Floor 3, floor 4, floor 5. Someone was coming. And only one person had the key card for the private elevator at this hour. Dr. Julian Stone. I looked around the room frantically. There was no back exit. The windows were sealed shut. I was trapped. I shoved the red leather book back into the hidden compartment behind the bookshelf. I tried to slide the false panel back into place, but my hands were slippery with sweat. The panel stuck. The elevator chimed. The doors slid open with a soft hiss. I spun around. Dr. Stone stepped out. He was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that cost more than my car. He held a silver briefcase in one hand and a bottle of vintage wine in the other. He stopped when he saw me. He did not look surprised. He did not look angry. Instead, a slow, predatory smile spread across his face. He walked into the office. The heavy doors closed behind him. Click. The lock engaged automatically. He placed the wine bottle on his glass desk. He looked at me with his pale, ice-blue eyes. He demanded to know why I was there so late. His voice was smooth. It was like velvet wrapped around a dagger. I tried to lie. I claimed I had forgotten my car keys. I took a step toward the door. But Dr. Stone stepped in my path. He was tall, 6 feet 2 inches of dominance. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. He told me that he knew I was lying. He pointed to the bookshelf behind me. He pointed to the false panel that was slightly askew. He revealed that he had installed a silent alarm on that specific shelf 3 days ago. My breath hitched. He knew. He had come back specifically for me. I braced myself. I expected him to attack me. However, he did something unexpected. He laughed. It was a soft, chilling sound. He walked over to the bookshelf and pushed the panel back into place. He turned back to me. He praised my intelligence. He said most secretaries were too busy with social media to notice his secrets. He walked back to his desk. He opened the bottle of wine. He poured 2 glasses of deep red liquid. He invited me to join him for a drink. I stared at the glass. I knew better than to accept a drink from a man who poisoned people for a living. I declined politely. I insisted I had to go home. Dr. Stone took a sip of his own wine. He informed me that leaving was not an option. He stated that the building security system was currently in lockdown mode. The doors would not open until 6 in the morning. He offered me a deal. He invited me to dinner at his private residence, the Obsidian Manor. He promised to tell me the truth about the Red Book if I joined him. He promised to let me go afterwards if I still wanted to go to the police. I looked at him. I knew he was lying. He was planning to kill me. However, I also knew that I had no service on my phone in this office. I needed to get him to a place where I had an advantage. He thought I was a terrified little girl, but he did not know about the item I had in my purse. He did not know about the tiny vial I carried with me every single day. I forced a shaky smile. I agreed to go with him. Dr. Stone beamed. He finished his wine in one gulp. He gestured for me to walk ahead of him. We took the elevator down to the garage. I made a silent vow to my mother. I promised her that tonight, the experiment would end. He thought he was the master of poison, but he was about to have dinner with the toxicologist. The Aston Martin tore through the darkness of Mulholland Drive. Rain lashed against the windshield like bullets. "Doctor." Julian Stone drove with one hand on the wheel. He looked relaxed. I sat perfectly still. My hand stayed inside my purse. My fingers traced the cold glass of the small vial hidden in the lining. 10 minutes later, the car slowed down. We approached a massive iron gate. It was 12 feet high and topped with sharp spikes. The gate recognized his car. It swung open with a heavy mechanical groan. The Obsidian Manor loomed ahead. It was a monstrosity of black glass and concrete. It looked like a spaceship that had crashed into the Hollywood Hills. Dr. Stone parked the car. He turned to me. He commanded me to get out. He warned me not to run. He pointed to the shadows near the garage. 2 large Dobermans emerged from the darkness. They growled low in their throats. He explained that they were trained to hunt anything that ran away. I stepped out into the rain. Dr. Stone scanned his thumbprint on the front door lock. Beep. The heavy door clicked open. He gestured for me to enter. I stepped into the lion's den. The interior was freezing. The floors were polished black marble. Dr. Stone closed the door behind us. The sound of the lock engaging was deafening. He demanded my purse. My heart skipped a beat. If he took the bag, he would find the vial. I had to think fast. I opened the bag. I fumbled around. I pulled out a small blue inhaler. I lied that I had asthma and needed to keep it close. I threw the bag onto a nearby chair. It was a gamble. Dr. Stone looked at the inhaler. He laughed. He mocked my weakness. But he did not check the bag. He ordered me to follow him to the dining room. I exhaled a breath I didn't know I was holding. I followed him down a long hallway. I counted the security cameras, one every 10 feet. We entered the dining room. It was a vast room overlooking the city lights of Los Angeles. In the center stood a long, black table, and standing in the corner was a man. He was huge. He wore a white chef's uniform, but he looked like a wrestler. Dr. Stone introduced him as Bruno. Bruno did not smile. He pulled out a chair for me. "Doctor." Stone sat at the head of the table. He snapped his fingers. Bruno poured wine into my glass. The liquid was dark and thick. It looked like blood. Then Bruno poured wine into Dr. Stone's glass from the same bottle. However, I knew how Dr. Stone operated. He often coated the inside of the victim's glass with a clear, tasteless toxin before the wine was poured. Dr. Stone raised his glass. He toasted to beauty and sacrifice. I stared at him. I asked him why he killed my mother. The smile vanished from his face. He claimed that my mother was a hero. He said her death helped him perfect a serum that reversed aging by 20 years. He leaned forward. He explained that wealthy clients paid him $10 million for one injection, but he needed fresh biological material to synthesize it. He needed young, healthy organs. He looked at my chest. He told me that my heart would sell for $2 million on the black market. The horror of his words washed over me. He picked up his fork. He signaled Bruno to serve the food. He commanded me to eat. He stated that the anesthesia worked better on a full stomach. He didn't even hide it anymore. He was telling me exactly how he was going to kill me. I picked up my wine glass. I swirled the liquid. The smell of the toxin was faint but unmistakable. It was digitalis, foxglove. It caused heart failure within an hour. I looked at Dr. Stone. I forced a tear to roll down my cheek. I asked him if it would hurt. "Doctor." Stone smiled softly. He lied that I would just go to sleep. I took a sip. The wine was bitter. I swallowed it. Dr. Stone looked satisfied. He signaled Bruno to leave the room to prepare the basement. Bruno walked out. We were alone. Just me, Dr. Stone, and the poison. I felt the first tingle in my fingertips. The digitalis was fast, but Dr. Stone did not know one critical fact. He did not know that for the past 5 years, I had been microdosing myself with digitalis every single morning. I had built up a tolerance. I was immune. However, I had to make him believe I was dying. I dropped my fork. I grabbed my chest. I gasped for air. I slumped forward. I knocked over the wine glass. Dr. Stone laughed. He stood up. He walked toward me. He looked down at my trembling body. He told me to relax. He reached down to check my pulse. He was close. So close. I waited until his hand touched my neck. Then, I opened my eyes. I stopped shaking. I looked directly into his shocked pupils. I spoke clearly. I told him that someone was going to die tonight. But it wasn't me. The silver steak knife flashed through the air. I aimed for his hand. Thud. The blade pierced through the meat of his palm. It pinned his hand to the mahogany table. Dr. Stone screamed. It was a raw, animalistic sound. Blood spurted across the white tablecloth. I did not hesitate. I grabbed my purse from the chair. I turned and ran toward the double doors. I sprinted into the hallway. I kicked off my heels to run faster. However, a siren began to wail. Dr. Stone had triggered the panic button with his free hand. Red emergency lights flashed. Metal shutters began to descend over the windows. Clang, clang. The house was going into total lockdown. I skidded to a halt. Heavy footsteps thundered from the kitchen. Bruno burst into the hallway. He held a massive meat cleaver in his right hand. He roared like a bear. He charged at me. I turned and ran toward the east wing. I threw myself into the library. I slammed the heavy oak doors shut. I locked the deadbolt. Boom. Bruno slammed his body against the door. The wood splintered. I backed away. I ran to the balcony doors. Locked. They required Dr. Stone's thumbprint. I looked for a weapon. There were only books and a heavy brass telescope. Boom. The library door cracked open. Bruno kicked it off its hinges. He stepped into the room. He raised the cleaver. He walked toward me slowly. He cornered me against the glass wall. He raised his arm to strike. I waited. I let him get close. I pulled out the small can of pepper spray from my purse. He swung the cleaver down. I dodged to the left. The blade smashed into a glass display case. I lunged forward. I pressed the button. Hiss. A stream of bright orange chemical spray hit him directly in the eyes. Bruno howled. He dropped the cleaver. He clawed at his face. He was blind. I grabbed the heavy brass telescope stand. I swung it with all my strength. I aimed for his knee. Crack. Bruno collapsed to the floor. He groaned in agony. I snatched the keys and the magnetic keycard from his belt. I ran back into the hallway. Suddenly, Dr. Stone's voice echoed through the house speakers. He announced that he was releasing gas into the ventilation system. I smelled it immediately. Bitter almonds. Cyanide. He was trying to kill me with the entire house. I had to find clean air. I ran to the service elevator. I swiped Bruno's card. I pressed the button for the sub-basement. The operating room would have its own independent air filtration. The elevator descended deep underground. The doors opened. I stepped into a sterile white corridor. I walked past an operating theater. I looked into the storage room. I stopped. My knees went weak. The room was filled with large glass jars. Floating inside them were organs, hearts, livers, eyes. I stepped closer to a jar on the top shelf. I read the label. Patient, Evelyn Vance. My mother's heart. He had kept it as a trophy. Rage filled my chest. I reached out to take the jar. Then, I heard slow clapping behind me. I spun around. Dr. Stone stood at the end of the corridor. His right hand was wrapped in a bloody napkin, but in his left hand, he held a silver pistol with a silencer. He smiled. He aimed the gun at my chest. He warned me to step away from the collection. I backed up until I hit the glass wall. I was trapped. However, I saw the fire alarm pull station next to his head, and I saw the large tank of oxygen in the corner. Oxygen is highly flammable. Gunfire creates sparks. I calculated the angle. If I dove, and if he missed, we would all blow up. Dr. Stone cocked the hammer of the gun. Click. He told me to say my last words. I looked him in the eye. I whispered, "Smile, Julian. You're on air." Dr. Stone froze. He looked at my pocket where the red light of my phone was blinking. He thought I was live streaming. He lowered the gun by an inch. He glanced at his own phone to check the signal. This was my chance. I grabbed a large glass jar from the shelf. I swung it with all my strength. I aimed for the metal shelving unit behind him. Smash. The shelf collapsed. Dozens of heavy jars rained down on Dr. Stone. Flammable preservation fluid splashed everywhere. Dr. Stone screamed. He fired the gun blindly in panic. Bang! One bullet hit the steel table next to my hip. Sparks flew. I dove behind an autopsy table. The sparks ignited the chemicals on the floor near the oxygen tank. Whoosh! A wall of blue fire erupted behind Dr. Stone. He spun around. He dropped the gun. He tried to bat the flames away from his jacket. The fire alarm triggered. Sprinklers hissed, but they only spread the chemical fire. I dove for the gun. Dr. Stone saw me. He tackled me to the wet floor. My head hit the concrete. His hands found my throat. He squeezed. He was strangling me. I couldn't breathe. My hand searched the floor. My fingers brushed against a sharp shard of broken glass. I gripped it. I jammed the shard into the side of his neck. Thud. Dr. Stone gasped. He fell back, clutching his bleeding neck. I rolled away. I gasped for air. Dr. Stone crawled toward me. He pulled a remote control from his pocket. He pressed a button. Clang. A heavy steel gate slammed down over the elevator doors. He threw the remote into the fire. He locked us in. He rasped that we would burn together. I looked at him. I remembered the vial in my pocket. I pulled it out. It wasn't an antidote. It was succinylcholine, a paralytic agent. I grabbed a clean syringe from the surgical tray. I drew up the liquid. Dr. Stone stood up. He charged at me one last time. I ducked under his arm. I slammed the needle into his thigh. I pushed the plunger down. 50 milligrams of pure paralysis. Dr. Stone roared. He backhanded me across the room. I hit the wall. He took a step to finish me. Then, his legs collapsed. He fell to the floor. He tried to move his arms. They wouldn't obey. The drug paralyzed every muscle in his body within 60 seconds. He was awake. He was conscious. But he couldn't move. I stood over him. I told him it was the same drug he used on his victims. I told him it was poetic. The fire was roaring. I looked at the wall behind the oxygen tank. The explosion had cracked the concrete. I saw a draft, an old tunnel. I grabbed a fire extinguisher and smashed the hole open. I looked back at Dr. Stone. He begged me with his eyes. I picked up the jar containing my mother's heart from the floor. I held it close. I told him I didn't have a hand free to save him. I climbed into the dark tunnel. I left him alone with the fire. I crawled through the narrow tunnel. Sharp rocks cut my knees. Above me, the earth shook as the obsidian manor exploded. I reached the exit. I pulled myself out onto a muddy cliff ledge. Rain lashed against my face. Below me, the Pacific Ocean roared against the rocks. Above me, the mansion was a torch against the night sky. I stood up. I clutched the jar. Suddenly, a bright tactical light blinded me. A man stood on the path. It was Agent Miller, my FBI contact. I felt relief. I shouted that I had the evidence. I expected him to help me. But Miller did not lower his gun. He clicked the safety off. He ordered me to kick the jar over the cliff. I asked him why. He stepped closer. I saw a surgical scar behind his ear. He revealed the truth. He wasn't investigating Stone. He was protecting him. He told me Stone's clients were senators and generals. Miller was the cleaner. My blood turned to ice. Miller aimed at my forehead. He demanded my phone to destroy the recording. I looked at the muddy ground. I looked at the cliff edge. I slowly pulled out my phone. I feigned defeat. I held the phone out. Miller stepped forward to take it. He stepped onto a patch of loose, wet mud. I dropped the phone. He looked down instinctively. I lunged. I threw my body at his ankles. Impact. Miller lost his balance. His boots slipped. The gun fired into the air. He fell backward. He slid toward the edge. He clawed at the mud, but there was nothing to hold. He screamed. Then he disappeared over the cliff. Splash! The sea swallowed him. I lay in the mud. I was alive. I picked up the jar. I picked up the phone. The signal was dead. Miller had lied about the live stream being active. Sirens wailed in the distance. Police were coming, but I knew they would arrest me. I was a fugitive now. I walked into the dark woods. I had a stash of cash and a fake passport waiting. As I walked, I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was Dr. Stone's phone. I had taken it earlier. I read the text message on the screen. The harvest is delayed. The client is impatient. Do you have the heart? I stopped. The head of the snake was still out there. I typed a reply. Dr. Stone is retired. This is new management. I smashed the phone and walked into the night. 6 months later, the grand ballroom of the Willow Creek Hotel in Washington, D.C. Senator Marcus Whitman stood at the podium. He was 70, but he looked 40. He was celebrating his re-election. I watched him from the back. I wore a black gown and green contact lenses. My name was Vanessa now. I checked my watch. The senator had finished the drink I handed him 10 minutes ago. I had spiked it with a modified chemical agent. The senator wiped his forehead. He began to shake. He collapsed to his knees. The crowd panicked. Security rushed to the stage. I walked through the crowd. I announced I was a doctor. I knelt beside the senator. He looked at me. He recognized the cold stare. I leaned close. I whispered that his new liver was resigning. I told him the girl from San Diego wanted it back. The senator convulsed and died on the stage. I stood up. I announced to the room that his heart couldn't handle the truth. I walked out before the paramedics arrived. 1 down, 11 to go. 2 days later, I stood in a small cemetery in Ohio at dawn. I placed a wooden box into a hole under an oak tree. Inside was the jar with my mother's heart. I covered it with earth. I planted a foxglove flower on top. I whispered that the debt was paid. But the mission was not over. I walked back to my black sedan. I opened the trunk. I opened the silver briefcase. I looked at the next file. The next name was a tech billionaire in Silicon Valley. He had bought a pair of blue eyes. My eyes narrowed. I closed the briefcase. I got into the car. I looked in the rearview mirror. I didn't see a victim. I saw a predator. The world had tried to consume me, but it forgot that some things are poisonous. I drove onto the highway, heading west. The doctor is out, but the toxicologist is in, and I have a prescription for everyone.